In this tutorial, we'll paint 5 quick and easy Christmas trees with watercolor, and I'll share a bunch of variations you can do to make each style your very own. Don't worry, I'll walk you through each one step by step so you can follow along at your own pace. All the supplies I'm using in this tutorial are linked down below in the description box, including 100% cotton cold press paper, Princeton Velvet Touch round brushes in a variety of sizes, a couple of light and dark brown colors from my Art Philosophy Woodlands palette, and a mixture of my favorite paints from Daniel Smith, including Deep Sap Green, Hooker's Green, and Indigo. And as an optional step, you can also use some white gouache to add some snowy touches to your trees. So go ahead and grab your supplies, put on your favorite Christmas music, and let's start painting. So the first tree we'll paint is a very simple but very cute classic Christmas tree. And what we're going to do is we'll be painting quick little strokes with the tip of our paintbrush pointing down. And I'll just work my way down, making quick little wispy strokes here. They have a little bit of a curve to them, but for the most part, they are angled downwards. And we will go back in with a second layer, so don't worry about adding darker colors just yet. I am just going to block it in with this light green for now. And you want to make sure to leave a little bit of white space. You don't just want it to turn into a blob of green, so the white space is definitely important. And you'll just continue working your way down. Each branch will have a couple extra branches coming off of it. And I'll just continue making these quick little strokes. Try not to overthink it. We will be filling in the middle with the brown color for the tree trunk. So make sure to leave some white space in the middle. And as you near the bottom, you want to start going a little bit wider for the base of the tree. And I'll also have a couple of branches coming down right at the very bottom. So our first layer is blocked in, so now I'll do that same thing, but I'm going in with a darker value. So darker value means I have less water in my mixture. And I'll start to just tap in a little bit of that darker green. Some of the strokes will be on top of the original layer. Some of them will be new strokes. You don't want to cover up your first layer entirely. You're just kind of filling in some of those gaps and adding these darker shadows. So you'll start to see some depth build up as you add in the additional layers. Don't overdo it. Just kind of use your intuition and fill in some of those spaces. No worries if there's a little bit of bleeding going on if your first layer hasn't completely dried yet. We are going for the loose style, so it doesn't have to be perfect. So now we can go ahead and add the tree trunk. So I'll take some of my light warm brown. I'll add a little bit here at the base of the tree, and then I'll fill in those white gaps. It doesn't have to be a perfectly straight line. You'll just be filling in between where the branches are. And there's our first very simple Christmas tree. It'll get a little more tricky as we go, but this is a very simple and easy one to start with. Now, I mentioned this at the start of the video, but there are a lot of ways that you can vary the same technique to get very different results. So using the same method of just making those quick wispy strokes, I did a couple variations here. So this one you can see the branches are just pointing more downward. So the original one, you can see the edges kind of poke out a little bit, and these ones are a little more slanted downward. Now, on the other hand, this is also using the same technique, quick wispy strokes, but they're just a little more curlicue type branches. So a little more exaggerated way than we did together. So just kind of pointing those tips upward. And the final variation that I did, of course, there's more that you can do than this, but I just made it more sparse. So the first examples are a little more full, and this one I just left more white space for the tree trunk. So again, there are a lot of ways that you can vary this, same easy technique, but different results. So now let's move on to the second tree. So our second tree is more of a blue spruce. So I'll be adding a little indigo to my green mixture. And the thing that I want to mention about this type of tree is It's a similar technique to the first one, but the branches will be pointing upwards. So my mixture is a little more blue this time, and I'll just start with a couple of quick strokes. But now instead of pointing downward, I'm going to have the tip of my brush pointing upward. And I'll just make a little branch here, just like that. You can see the direction is upward. And then I'm just making very light strokes, almost like pine needles, to finish off this branch. So I'll do one on the other side as well. Again, you want it pointing upward. And then making those quick strokes. So again, making sure it's pointing upward, and then using a very light hand to continue those dainty strokes and fill it out. You can also create additional branches coming off of your first branches to fill it out a bit. It is really up to you. I don't want you to feel like you have to follow my exact strokes. You can add more branches, you can add less. And another note here is you don't want your tree to be perfectly symmetrical. So, I could go ahead and add a branch that's a little further up. You can vary the size, the shape of each branch. And remember, we will go in with a second layer. So sometimes it looks a little bit wonky when you're first starting, but once you start to fill it in, it really starts to look more like a complete, beautiful Christmas tree. So a lot of these trees that we'll be painting have a very similar technique of making those quick, dainty, light strokes. And that's what I love about this, is it's kind of mindless. You don't have to overthink anything. You can just kind of let the tip of your brush dance across the page. So you can see I'm going in with a slightly darker value of blue here, and it's gently bleeding into the first layer. Now remember, you want your branches to be slightly wider as you work your way towards the bottom of the tree as well. And so you'll start to see that nice tree shape form as you add more and more branches. So you just want to make sure you have a steady but light hand on your brush. When you start to overthink your paintings, at least when I do that, I find that I have a really tight grip on my brush, and then it's hard for me to paint in the loose style. So if you feel yourself doing that, just try your best to relax, keep your hand loose, keep your wrist loose, and just enjoy the process. So I'm adding a few more branches here coming down at the bottom to just kind of fill it out. In general, you want them pointing upward, but the branches at the bottom can be a little more down. So now I can go in with my second layer, and this will be a slightly darker value. So it's a little more pigmented, and I'll be doing the same strokes. And just like the first tree, I don't want to cover up every single stroke that I did in the first layer. I'm just kind of enhancing what is already there, deepening some of the shadows, and just filling it out a bit. And you'll still want to make sure that you're aware of your white spaces. You don't want to fill in too much. And I also recommend making more of the dark strokes towards the center where the trunk is, because that's where the tree will be a little more full. That's where more of the shadows would be. So just go ahead and gently start adding in that second layer. Now I'll let all of this dry before I go in with the light brown for the tree trunk. And now that it's nice and dry, I'll go in with my really light tan brown. And again, I'm just filling in those white spaces. I don't ever want to do a full line because some of those branches are in front of the trunk. So you want to be able to convey some of that depth. And that's why I just fill in a little bit of the white space and the gaps. And if you want, you can go back in with a second layer with a darker brown and just tap in a little more shadows along the trunk. And give it a little bit of texture. And there's our spruce tree. All right, so tree number 3 is a little bit trickier, and it's quite a bit different than the first 2 that we've done. So I'm going to start just by penciling in a straight line to help keep me on track. That'll be for the tree trunk. And this will be a little bit different. We will need to be cognizant of our time because we're going to be utilizing the wet on wet technique, because you want to make sure that your initial layers are still wet because we will be blending it out a bit. So we'll be placing some branches in just like we did on the first couple, but I'll be using more pressure on my strokes. And this will be a really beautiful snowy Christmas tree. I want to make sure I'm leaving some white space just like we did in the first couple, but I'm applying more pressure. So you can see these strokes aren't as wispy as my strokes were for the first couple of trees. I want them to be a little thicker, and I really don't want you to worry about making perfect looking strokes for this one because they'll all get blended out anyways. So just kind of haphazardly lay down your strokes, make sure you leave plenty of white space in between because that's where the fluffy snowy area is going to be. And just make sure you're working quickly because you want to make sure that these are still wet when you go in to blend. So I'll just continue working my way down, applying these strokes. They are looking pretty messy, but again, that's fine. It's all going to be blended out. And this is one of those trees where it looks pretty wonky at this part, but once we start adding more layers and softening things out, it'll look more realistic. So I will go ahead and do one final row here. So now I'll go ahead and rinse off all the color off of my brush so it is very clean, a little bit damp, and I'll just start softening out the top of each of these layers, and that's what'll give it the really beautiful snowy effect. So I'm just taking my clean brush and gently softening that out. And this is why you have to work fairly quickly because you don't want those initial layers to be dry. You want to be able to pull out some of that color. And make sure you also rinse off your brush in between so it remains nice and clean. And you'll just work your way down, softening out those initial branches. So you'll start to see that nice little snowy effect start to form, and that is exactly what we're going for. So again, just taking that clean brush and feathering out that color. Now, again, I'm working quickly here. I want to make sure it's still nice and wet, and I'll go in and start to tap in a really dark value for the shadows. So the light value that we just did is giving the snowy effect, and then this dark value is adding depth and adding shadows and just kind of giving some dimension to your tree. Again, don't worry about making perfect strokes. We are just kind of tapping in some darker values here and letting it bleed. And we're really taking advantage of what watercolor has to offer here, which is bleeding and blooming and letting it kind of do its own thing. So like I said, it starts out looking a little weird, but now you can really start to see it develop into a beautiful tree. And remember, you always want your darker values to be towards the center where the trunk would be. So just try your best to focus all of the shadows in that area. So now I'm just going in and adding final little branches, and there we go. So it really creates a beautiful, soft, snowy effect. I had a little bit of blooming going on there at the base of the tree, so I'll just use a clean brush to soak up just a little bit of that. And now it's up to you. It is a pretty full tree, so you could leave it as is, or if you want to add a little stump at the bottom, you can. Mine is still wet, so I'll leave a little bit of a white space there so it doesn't bleed. And tap in some darker color. And there you go, a beautiful snowy tree. Now, the fourth type of tree reminds me of the Charlie Brown Christmas tree because it's a little more sparse than the others, but it's still very cute. And this one does take quite a while because it consists of a lot of tiny wispy strokes for the pine needles, but I'll show you each step of the process and then you can go at it at your own pace. So for this one, it'll be a little different because I'm going to start by actually painting the tree trunk first. So I'll go in with a very light value of my brown, lay that color down, and then I'll add a little bit of shadow and texture to it while it's still wet by adding in a darker value of that same brown along the edge. So again, this is the wet on wet technique. So you'll see that color bleed into the first layer. I'll also take a darker, cooler brown and tap some of that in as well. Now this is really one of the trees that starts off looking very weird, but then it builds out nicely as we add more layers. So bear with me. I'm going to start with a light value of green, and I'm just going to start to place some really dainty lines for where I want each of the pine branches to be. So again, it's going to look a little crazy here for a little bit, but I just want to kind of sketch out almost where I want those branches to be. And you are more than welcome to add more branches. You can add longer branches, shorter ones. Really, I encourage you to make it your own. I just want to show you the general steps, and then feel free to add your own style to it. You're also not set in stone by doing this, so I just like to space out the first few and get some down onto the paper, but you're always more than welcome to add more as you go. So for each of these branches, we'll be doing very, very fine tip strokes. So I'm using the very tip of my brush to create super fine strokes just like this, because these are pine branches. So as you know, pine needles are very thin and wispy, and I will do the same thing for this branch right next to it. So keeping my strokes very light and dainty, and this is what we'll be doing on each and every one of these branches, using the very tip, almost like it's just scratching the surface of the paper, and applying those strokes down. And that creates really cute looking pine branches. And just another reminder to be aware of your white space. You don't want the entire branch to turn into a blob of green. You want to maintain at least a little bit of white space in there. And this is definitely one of those trees where I want to be able to build out layers. So for some of these, I'll have a light value, which means I'm adding more water to my mixture. So you can see these strokes are very light green. And then I'll go back in and darken them with the second layer. So you really just want to add some variability to your tree. Some will be darker, some will be lighter, some facing upwards, but all of them will have these very wispy strokes. And this is really why this tree takes quite a while, because it takes a lot of those tiny strokes to fill in a full branch. So I'll go ahead and finish this. I'll speed it up a bit, but feel free to work at your own pace, and then we'll meet back up in a bit. All right, so I finished my first layer. I went ahead and added a few more branches. And one thing I want to mention is you want a couple of your branches to overlap the tree trunk. So you can see this one and this one are kind of overlapping, and that shows that that branch is in front. You don't just want all of the branches sticking straight out from the side. That wouldn't look very realistic. So just make sure you add at least a couple stems overlapping the tree trunk. So now I'll go in and just kind of deepen these. So I'm using a darker value. I don't want to cover up every single stroke that I made in the first layer, but I just want to accentuate those shadows a bit. But I'll still be using those very wispy strokes using the tip of my brush. And this really helps bring some dimension to the painting. If it was all one same color of green, it would start to look a bit flat. But adding in the darker values on top just really helps to fill it out a bit and help it look a little more realistic. Again, we're not going for hyper-realism here. We're still going for the cute, loose style painting, but I think you can still maintain that loose style while adding just a tiny bit of detail to it. Again, it's totally up to you if you want to add more branches. If you want it to be very Charlie Brown style, you can only have a couple branches. I think that looks really cute as well. It is completely up to you. All right, so there you have it. And now we can move on to the fifth and final tree. So we have completed 4 beautiful types of trees, one with several variations. And now let's start on the 5th one. Now this one is a lot more loose than especially the last one we just did. So feel free to use quite a bit of water and keep your hand and your wrist nice and loose. And let's just have fun with some expressive strokes. So I'll start by loading up a very light value, and you can start making pretty thick strokes here. So keeping it kind of smaller on top, but then we'll be applying more pressure as we apply these strokes towards the bottom. So you just want to make these nice swooping strokes. Again, same as all the other ones, we want to leave some white space in between. These other ones have been pretty wispy and thin using the tip of your brush, but for this one, we'll go beyond that, and you really want the belly of your brush to be able to expand out and create some bigger branches with more pressure. And so you start to get these really nice whimsical type of branches. It almost kind of looks like something from Whoville. Any Grinch fans out there will know what I'm talking about. But just have fun creating these very whimsical, expressive strokes. So I'll just add a few last ones here for the bottom layer, and you can see my brush is really expanding out onto the paper because I'm applying more pressure. All right, so the first layer is looking good, so now I'll go in with a slightly darker layer. And I'll probably end up doing 3 layers for this one. So I don't want to go too dark just yet. I have a medium value. And you can see my first layer is still a little wet, so some of that color bleeds, but that's totally fine. And I'll just start adding in some more strokes. Feel free to overlap some of the original ones. Add some more. Make sure to make them bigger as you work your way down. And do your best not to overthink it. Just plop your brush down and create some nice fluffy branches. I'm really glad we're ending on this one because it's a lot of fun. You don't have to overthink anything. You can just create big fluffy strokes. So I'll give this a little time to dry. I don't want my final dark layer to bleed too much, so I'll just give it a couple minutes. All right, now it's not perfectly dry, but it is for the most part. So I'll go in with my final layer of very dark green here. And I don't want to overpower those first 2 layers. I just want to add a little bit of dimension. And I'm going to try to focus it towards the middle of the tree because that's where the majority of the shadows will be. And you can also experiment with different brush sizes. So if you want some big brush strokes down at the bottom, you can do a bigger brush, or you can just do what I'm doing and get those bigger strokes by applying more pressure. Just make sure you're keeping your hand and your wrist nice and loose. Now, as I wait for this one to dry, this could be a really fun one to add a little bit of white gouache on top to act as snowflakes or some snow sitting on the tree branches. So I'm going to go ahead and get my gouache ready. And you want to make sure all your green layers are dry before you go in with the gouache, and you can start to just add some little snow patches on the top of each of the branches. And gouache is opaque, so it lays on nice and thick on top. And I'll just kind of add a little bit of a snowy effect here on top of the green. If you don't have white gouache, you can also try with a gel pen or some bleed-proof white. Again, I'm not trying to overpower it here. I just kind of want to enhance it a bit with some of this snowy effect. So I'll speed it up here, but go ahead and take your time. All right, and there you have it. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and as always, if you want to take your watercolor skills to the next level, I have a variety of online classes available for you. Those are available on Skillshare and also on my website for those of you not on Skillshare already. So I'll link those down below, and I hope you have a wonderful holiday season, and I'll see you in the next video.